pleased to present a speaker from Foothill AIDS Project, Laura Silvius. She's a wonderful nonprofit professional who came to Claremont via the East Coast, who's originally from the area. Her mother is one of the judges who serves on my symphony board, Judge Cynthia Lovegoodson. And she also volunteered at the symphony before she went over to Foothill AIDS Project. So I'm very pleased that she could be
So
here.
once again, I'm here to talk about HIV and the millennium. The constituents of HIV and of FAP in particular have changed quite a lot. So we're going to start with the difference between HIV and AIDS. There's still a lot of confusion about this in general. Even my own parents mix them up and use them interchangeably. They are not interchangeable. HIV is human immunodeficiency virus. It's a retrovirus, which means it gets in and then copies itself and eventually makes you sick. It doesn't happen right away the way that a cold does, for example. It is the cause of AIDS. It is not the same thing as AIDS. Again, you'd be shocked. You'd be really, really shocked how many people use it interchangeably. And part of what has made HIV so devastating in the community over the last 40 years is that it targets the very system, the immune system, which helps us fight off colds, and it turns those viruses, those cells into copies of itself. It's extremely devastating when it goes untreated. Next. So this is it. This is the CD4 plus cells, also known as T cells. These are what gets activated. This is why you get tired when you're starting to get sick. That's your body saying, okay, we need to get going and fight against this new cold, this new infection, this new whatever, and you need to rest so that we can focus all our energy on that. Left untreated, it reduces the number of CD4 cells and you get infected with things that normally wouldn't hurt a baby, with things that are already normally in your body that might be kept in check by the normal activity of the immune system. For example, there's a specific type of pneumonia called pneumocystis pneumonia. PCP otherwise, but not that other kind of PCP. And everybody has pneumocystis already in their lungs. When you get HIV, part of what caused a lot of confusion in the early 80s was people getting pneumocystis pneumonia. Nobody dies of pneumocystis unless your immune system is already compromised. So people thought they must have already had cancer. There was actually a form at the CDC where you had to, when you were requesting the medication to fight this particular type of pneumonia, you listed an underlying cause. And part of what led to the discovery of HIV as a new disease, and AIDS as a new disease, was there were multiple requests for this medication from the CDC that didn't have an underlying cause. And somebody started to look into it and realize that there was something new out there in the community. There are 7 stages to the virus. A lot of you probably know more or less everything I've already said so far, but you might not know a lot about how HIV exactly works. There are several different types of enzymes and proteins that HIV needs in order to be able to get into the cell. So the first thing it does is it finds a T4 cell, a T cell, a CD4 cell, and binds to it. Next, it gets into the cell, changes that cell to look like the HIV virus itself. It takes the RNA and turns it into the virus's DNA. Gets inside that DNA, makes more proteins of itself, then goes back outside of the nucleus of the cell, but still inside the cell, comes back together as a new virus, and then explodes out into the body, go forth, and multiply. Not exactly what I think we all had in mind, but there we go. One thing that people, especially back in the 80s when it was such a desperate cause, people were really desperate for a cure. There is no cure for HIV. You have it once, you have it for life. And that's part of why you really have to get tested, because there is treatment, and the treatment can work pretty well, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but testing is so important, getting tested regularly, getting tested often. The entire regimen to fight HIV is called antiretroviral treatment or therapy, or ART. And again, get tested. That's going to be one of those things that I'm going to hammer on a lot, so be prepared. AIDS is what's caused by, go back one. No, back. One more. There we go. AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. This is the disease that HIV causes. The immune system has been weakened so much that you are so sick you have nothing. This is when you get the pneumocystis, when you get toxoplasmosis, which a lot of early AIDS victims died of. This is a disease that's usually found in cats. You would die of diseases that were found in sheep. diseases that no human ever got ever. And this is part of why it was so confusing in that time period. The category now for somebody to be diagnosed with AIDS is to have a CD4 count under a certain amount. Usually it's about 500. The normal amount is over 2,000, anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000. Or if you have any one or a combination of a certain list of diseases, pneumocystis and toxoplasmosis being among them. Without treatment, the journey from HIV to AIDS can take maybe 2 years, maybe 7, maybe 20. It depends on the person. This is another reason why it was so confusing in the early 80s, because you had people who have only been showing symptoms for a short time, and then people who've been showing symptoms that were just getting gradually worse over many, many years. It really just depends on the person. It can be different from case to case without treatment. There is no real cure for AIDS. There is treatment, and sometimes that treatment can reverse AIDS and just get you back to being HIV positive if you're treated early enough. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Usually once somebody has been diagnosed with full-blown AIDS, they might have about a year left by the time the diagnosis goes. Look at the spread of HIV throughout the world. There's really no place that hasn't been touched by HIV. It's really just a matter now of how good a job countries do at keeping track of the virus through their various health departments. As we all know, it can be transmitted through unprotected sexual contact. I am so glad I'm giving this speech at a church, by the way. Pregnancy is actually a very common way for HIV to transmit from mother to child, especially during breastfeeding, because you can give birth to an HIV-negative baby when you have HIV, but if you then breastfeed your child, that is one way to spread HIV. Injection drug use, occupational exposure, such as needle sticks for those who work in hospitals or as phlebotomists, and blood transfusion, organ transplant. These were all very common ways that people got HIV in the 80s. There's still common ways that people get it today, but luckily with education, it's gotten much rarer. There are only 5 fluids in the body that have the virus in it. Those are blood, semen, preseminal fluid, once again, I'm so glad to be here, vaginal fluid, and breast milk. What's not included is perspiration, saliva, pus, not a lot, but people are still very much afraid sometimes about the virus. It's not going to be spread through close contact. It'll be spread through very close contact, but not through close contact. HIV can enter the body through the lining of the anus or the rectum, the vagina and or the cervix, the opening to the penis. I'm really glad to be here. A mouth that has sores or bleeding gums, again, blood being the dominant factor there, saliva not so much. Cuts or sores and sites of needle injections. This is a pie chart from the CDC about new HIV diagnoses in 2015. As you can see, African Americans make up the largest percentage of new HIV infections. There are lots of reasons for that, and we'll go into some of them later in the presentation. The biggest one is poverty. More than almost any other factor, poverty is the biggest modern determinant of who gets HIV/AIDS. But Caucasians make up another 27%, Latinos another 24% after that. So the 3 major racial categories in the United States are also the 3 that are most likely to get HIV. But after race and after sexuality, poverty becomes the next major consideration about who's at risk.
So that graph
Yes.
is a graph of the people who have AIDS in the United States?
It's a graph of new HIV infections in 2015 in the United States. So not people with AIDS. In the world, about 36.7 million people live with HIV. In the United States, it's about 1.2 million. But we're not totally sure about that number, and that's because about 1 in 8 people don't know that they have HIV at any given time. And we're doing okay with it. We got a little under 500,000 people receiving treatment in 2012. That's not as good as it should be. And there's a slight disparity with the statistics here because we don't have stats for how many were receiving ART in 2016, which is when the 1.2 million people living with HIV comes from. But as you can see, it's only about a third or a little bit more. It's not nearly where it should be, and we're really trying hard to get people who have HIV to get on medication right away. And it's, the United States is actually doing pretty good as far as babies born with HIV. It's down to 200. It's still 200 too many, but it's certainly a lot better than it was in past years. Now, once again, we have a graph by sexuality and race of who gets HIV. So we've already seen the one just by race. This also talks about men who have sex with men versus heterosexual contact for men and women. As you can see, in every one of these sexuality categories, African Americans are still the most at-risk population. And that's from the CDC as well. About half of new HIV infections occur in people under 24 years of age. We have a lot of people who are teenagers who get HIV and then stay with us for as long as they need to. We have people who get HIV as teens and their families don't know, their parents might not know. And we certainly always protect our clients' privacy, but that's the most at-risk time in your life, is when you're under 25 years old. You're more likely to think that you're invincible, to think that you're going to live forever. You're more likely to engage in dangerous behavior, be it driving a car too fast or doing other things, and some of those other things can lead to HIV infection. People with an STI, that's a sexually transmitted infection. We use the term STI because it's an infection, it's not usually a disease. The disease was a more common, STD was a more common acronym about 10 years ago or so. It's now we've used STIs instead. People under 24 acquire more than half of all new STI infections. People with an STI who then get HIV are more likely to get HIV, to spread HIV. They're more likely to have a higher viral load in their bodies. And people who get an STI are already more likely to get HIV. So it's just a very dangerous time. It's very important to be safe, to use protection, and if you really consider yourself to be in a high-risk category for getting HIV, and we'll go into that a little bit later, to get on treatment, because there is treatment available. Once again, we'll just go back to risk. This is an idea of what is risk. Black and Latino people have the highest incidence of HIV. That's people who are already living with HIV, not new diagnoses, although Black people still make up the biggest category in that, the biggest racial group in that category as well. You're more likely to get HIV if there's already people living with HIV in your community, be that in your apartment complex, at your schools, at your works, other kinds of things. People who don't know their status are more likely to get HIV. That's people who don't get tested regularly. People who have a lower income or a lack of education. Because what happens when you have a good job and it pays regularly? What do you get? Insurance. There you go, insurance. That's it. And so people who don't have a regular job that has access to good health insurance are less likely to get tested, are less likely to know their status, are more likely to get HIV. Luckily in California we have some protections against that, and also now nationally, although the current administration is certainly trying to do their best. But we do have some protections in California that the rest of the country doesn't have. And also just health inequities in general. People who are more likely to get sick, again, it goes back to all these different categories. Lower income, less education, all of these lead to health inequities anyway, and HIV just is another one in the list. This is from AIDS View, which is a really great website for looking at the progression and the risk of HIV. As you can probably guess, the dark red areas are the ones with the communities with the highest risk, highest incidence of HIV. You can see that LA County is certainly one of them, and that San Bernardino is not exactly what you'd call orange or yellow or gray. There is only one state that doesn't take very good records of HIV in the community. It's South Dakota. Yeah.
Why is that?
Pick a number.
You don't know you're unfunded.
And Native American.
That's part of it. All of those things are parts of it. There are lots of reasons why, but a rural community, not great health establishments, and indigenous people, but also just not a great infrastructure. That was the word. Not a great infrastructure in general. But San Bernardino and Riverside counties, which are the other two areas that FAP covers, also have a pretty high incidence of HIV as well. Thank you, Dean. Once again, about 1 in 8 people don't know their status. That's 1 in 8 people who already have HIV and are not getting tested. And this is a nice little codicil to every statistic that you're going to hear about infection rates and people living with HIV. A nice codicil to that map that we just showed, because 1 in 8 people living with HIV don't know that they have it and can actively spread it to others. In 2015, that pie chart that we showed earlier, that was just under 40,000 new HIV infections. That's 1 every 13.3 minutes, which actually is doing pretty good because in 2012, it was 9.5 minutes. So it's going down. Not as much far down as it needs to, but it's getting better. And once again, because so many people don't know their status, we think that there's maybe another 45,000 new infections every year, or 1 every 11.5, or that there are a total of 45,000, not that 39,500, but a total of just about 45,000. All right, next please. Yep, this is just the introduction to the new section. Thank you. You would be shocked. You would be truly shocked at how many people still think that you can get HIV from close contact. That's touching, that's kissing, that's sharing a fork. That is just not true. So many people still think, these are some of the most common things that people still believe about HIV. None of them on this list are true. These are some things that people think are not true about HIV, that it cannot be transmitted through oral sex when it can, that it cannot be transmitted through heterosexual sex when it can, from men to women and from women to men. That it can take years to appear, and that part can be true. That part is true sometimes. Some people take years of living with the virus and they don't know. Some people think that every time you have somebody with HIV, you could just tell. Everyone knows if you have HIV, and it's not true. It can live in your body for a long, long time before you start to exhibit any physical symptoms. Here are some things that other people, that again, people think might not be true. If you get infected with HIV today and you go on medication tomorrow, there's no reason why your lifespan should be shortened by a single day. The odds are in your favor. So HIV does not have to lead to AIDS. In fact, more and more we're seeing most of the population of people who live with HIV, that population is edging past the age of 50 now. It's only going to get older, which is great, because new infections, again, occur in younger people, but the people who live to be past 50 and past 60, that number's growing too. Two partners who have HIV and engage in a sexual relationship should still use protection. The reason why is because the HIV virus mutates often, a lot. This is why there's no cure. This is part of the science behind that. Because you can get infected with one strand of the virus and your partner can be infected with another one, and you can co-infect each other. So if you have a partner, if you're HIV positive and you have a partner also with HIV, don't stop using protection. You don't have the same virus. You might not have the same virus, and you can still make each other sick. Another thing people think when they get infected with HIV is that their lives are over. They can't have kids, they can't have relationships. Once again, this is not true. With proper therapy and medical treatment, you can get your viral load down to 0, down to what we call undetectable. And then you can do things. You can have children. You can have a fulfilling sexual relationship. God, I'm so glad I'm doing this. And once again, HIV symptoms can take years to appear. You can't tell someone has HIV just by looking at them. Thank you. I want to go into a little bit about the medications of HIV, and some of this is going to be a little bit tricky because we didn't get into tons of detail about how the virus mutates, grows and multiplies, but we went through the basic 7-step process. And we have all these that work with them. You have nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors, which stop one of about 4 different proteins. Non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors, which stop another one of the proteins that HIV needs to multiply. Protease inhibitors, another protein stopper. Fusion inhibitors, this actually stops the HIV virus from binding with the CD4 plus cell. Entry inhibitors, this stops the virus from entering into the nucleus of that cell. Integrase inhibitors, another protein blocker. And please forgive me if I mess this word up because this is not my area of expertise, but pharmacokinetic enhancers. I think I did it. Pharmacokinetic enhancers, which is basically just gives power to everything else that we saw. Now, as you can tell from that list, that's 7 different types of medications at one time. Each one was available by itself, and that was it. So it was a cocktail of about 24 pills that had to be taken at very specific times in the day. Some of them had to be taken 3 hours apart, some 6 hours apart, some 4 hours apart, some 12 hours apart, some once a day. Now what we have are some combination medications that just cut down on that. There are even some where it's just 1 pill a day, some where it's only 2 or 3. Either way, it's much better than trying to take 7 different types of pills every day at different times. And oh my goodness. And part of how you go into picking the right medication is looking at several different factors. If you have other diseases or infections, such as liver or kidney problems, some of those medications, those combination medications especially, aren't going to be right for you. Sometimes the side effects can be pretty drastic, and that's a big reason why people stop adhering to their medication. Those drugs can interact with other drugs or even with each other, and it's entirely possible that you're taking one regimen of HIV medication for several years, and suddenly a new interaction starts up, a new side effect that wasn't there before, and you have to switch. Drug resistance testing. Now this is a little bit of the scary part, which is about 1 in 4 new HIV infections are a strand of HIV that is resistant to all those drugs that we just talked about. Convenience. Once again, 1 pill a day versus 7 or 26. So that's another thing to think about. Lifestyle, and that's another big factor, because HIV medication really needs to be adhered to, no pun intended, but religiously. And if your lifestyle is not conducive to that, if you don't have a routine that allows you to go and take these medications at the different times of day that you need to take it, that's a factor, because one of the worst things that you can do is start a regimen for HIV medication and then for some reason go off of it. What happens then, you're on this medication and your viral load is going down, 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 down. You stop for a couple of days or a week or so. What happens then, not only does your viral load shoot back up with a vengeance, but that's also one of the times that HIV can mutate within your body, and suddenly you have a drug-resistant strain of the virus. It's not even the same strain that you were originally infected with. And now, even when you go back on your medication, it might not work anymore. And then that's what you're passing on, is that drug-resistant strain of HIV. HIV mutates faster than almost any other virus we know of. And cost. Who wants to guess how much it costs to treat HIV for 1 year? Thousands is correct. Anyone want to give a number?
3.
Ha!
100. That was the wrong
Less.
guess.
Less than 100,000. More than 3. It's about 26,000 a year. So insurance is a big factor. There's also a program in California. Again, we're very lucky in California. We have a lot of protections that people don't have elsewhere. There's a program called ADAP, AIDS Drug Assistance Program, where if you're earning under $50,000 a year, they pay for your medications completely. Which, when you think about it, when you have 50 grand and you might have a family, you might have other people who count on you, it goes fast. Now, here's one of the really great things about HIV today is we have medication that can prevent you from getting the virus after exposure, but before the HIV virus has had a chance to enter T4 cells and start multiplying. This is called post-exposure prophylaxis, which is PEP or PEP. You begin this drug medication within 3 days, so if you get an accidental needle stick, or if you make a really stupid mistake and suddenly their partner from the night before says they have HIV, you can still get on this medication and within 3 days and take it for 28 days, and there's a good chance that it's in the 90th percentile that you might get HIV. It's a really great development. It is not 100% effective, it's in the 90s, but no drug, biologists never like to say that anything is 100% effective. They always try to avoid that if possible. But it's about 92, 88%, somewhere in there. And it's not something that you should be doing all the time. It's an emergency situation. It's not plan A. It's not something that it's not the, it's for an emergency situation. It's like I said, for a needle stick, for a silly mistake where a condom broke or something like that. That's what it's for. It's not the go-to plan. Even better, we have the exact same medication, but it can be used for high-risk groups, and we call that pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. This is for people, again, in those, when we talked about risk categories before, people in high-risk groups for getting HIV can go on this go on this drug. And again, adherence is very, very important. Taking it at the same time every day, very important. But this drug, to prevent you from getting HIV, is effective to about 96% or higher. I've heard estimates of 99.9% from some people at the NIH and NIAID as well. Again, it's for people who, IV drug users. Of course, I wouldn't recommend it because IV drug users don't tend to be the most responsible group of people. For men who have sex with men, for black women, it's estimated about 1 in 8 African American women will get HIV in their lifetime.
What did you say?
1 in 8 African American women will get HIV. That's a current stat from the...
In the world or U.S.?
In the U.S.
Is among what population? All?
Among the African American female population. So, we do include black women as a high-risk category for HIV, as you can see. Men who have sex with men, stereodiscordant couples, that's couples where one has HIV and the other doesn't. That's obviously a very high-risk group. People who don't use condoms consistently, regardless of sexual preference or gender. People who have partners from a geographical region with a generalized epidemic such as Southern Africa. What's the most important thing when talking about HIV medication or prevention? Everybody?
Yes.
There we go, adherence, that's it. This is literally what works. This is what makes the drug 98, 99% effective. And that 96% happens because some people don't take it. It has to be taken at the same time every day. Put something on your phone. Just do it. PrEP and PEP are also not right for people with kidney dysfunction. It can affect that, especially if you continue to use it for a long period of time. It also has osteoporosis implications. There are other side effects that can happen with it. But for people in high-risk categories, one of the biggest things you can do also is to get checked every 3 months, get tested every 3 months. And even if you're on PrEP, still practice safe sex and use condoms every time. Another factor of risk is what we call barriers to care. This again fits in with poverty. People who live in poverty are less likely to have insurance, they're less likely to go to a doctor in general, they're less likely to go to a doctor even when they're sick, they're less likely to be totally honest with their doctors. There's also, unfortunately, some prejudice on behalf of medical caregivers. It's been shown that doctors are more likely to prescribe something like PrEP or PEP to, unfortunately, white or Asian people as opposed to African American or Latino people. There are prejudices in the medical care community that we don't think are necessarily on purpose, but there's definitely a thought that African American people and Latino people are less likely to be adherent to these medications, and doctors don't want to give the medications to people who aren't going to adhere to them. So it's very important to talk to your doctors, or if you work in the medical community, to really confront these questions. Ask your patients, did the doctor tell you about this drug or that drug? Put checks in there, because this is one of the ways that we break down those barriers to medical care. One thing that we do is, you saw that acronym MSM, men who have sex with men. One thing that especially the medical community and the HIV community tries to do is avoid using terms like gay or bisexual, because if you ask somebody if they identify as gay, they might say no. If you ask them if they engage in a behavior such as having sex with another man, they're more likely to answer you honestly, because you're focusing on the behavior and not on the identity. So that's part of why I wanted to get to that explanation as well. We talked about the cost of treating HIV. The cost of PrEP, of avoiding HIV, is about half of that. It's $13,000 a year. There are different service organizations in the Inland Empire. Foothill AIDS Project is a huge one. We just moved into East LA. We also cover the San Gabriel Valley, Western and Central Riverside County, and all of San Bernardino County. These are our 5 offices. There are also other agencies. There's APLA, there's Desert AIDS Project, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which operates in both San Bernardino and Los Angeles counties.
you tell them where your headquarters are here?
Our headquarters are right here in Claremont. We're getting there. We're moving into the FAP section
Okay.
about specifically my company. So
Yeah.
we're getting there, I promise. This is our mission. It's to positively impact and improve the lives of people affected by or at risk for HIV and AIDS through support services, education, and outreach, which is part of why I'm here. And our vision, we try to do what we can to intervene early and help stop the spread of HIV in our community to the fullest extent that we can, and to provide services to people living with HIV. You can see this is a little bit of an older version because it doesn't show that we just moved into East LA, which only happened about a month ago. One thing that we really want to try to do is to empower our clients to make their decisions for themselves and reach their health goals for themselves as well, and to get to help them live healthier lives. I know, it goes on for a while, but that's, I tried to make it fun for you guys. These are some of our core programs. We'll go into some more detail about them, but if anyone has any questions at the outset, I wanted to take a moment and just ask or answer or any, no? Okay, let's go. Mental health and substance abuse. This is a single department at FAP for what I think are obvious reasons, but in case you didn't know, mental health and substance abuse are very closely linked. I think that it's important that they're both in one department. And we offer one-on-one counseling, also support groups, and for specific groups, one for men, one for women, a co-ed group, groups in Spanish, and also we just started one a couple months ago for people under 30 living with HIV as well. Housing is one of our biggest departments because there's actually a bumper sticker in our office that says, "Where do the homeless keep their medicines?" If you're homeless, it's really difficult to adhere to an HIV regimen, and as we all know, adherence is what?
Essential.
That's it! So one thing we really try to do is get people into a home, even if it's a motel or tenant-based housing, just as soon as possible, and get them started so that they can start adhering to their regimen once again. Early intervention services, that's sort of what I'm doing here, which is a little bit of outreach, a little bit of educating the community in general. We also go to schools, colleges, health fairs, all that sort of thing. And if anyone has any ideas, we'll go there too, just contact me. These are our offices. Our headquarters are right down the street in Claremont, in the basement of the United Church of Christ. They've been very generous to us to let us rent office space from them there. We also have offices in downtown Riverside and San Bernardino, in Pasadena, and in Hesperia. Our business hours are 9 to 5:30. As you can see, we can be available on weekends. And now how you can help. We've got 2 major fundraisers in the year. We've got Dining Out for Life, which is coming up. It begins this coming Thursday and ends the following Thursday. We have 14 different restaurants that are participating. I'll go into that in the next slide. What? Not yet. Down. We also have a bowling tournament, a celebrity bowling tournament, the first Sunday of October.
Very fun.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. This will be our 15th year, actually, doing that. And donations are always appreciated. We have it so that our overhead is very reasonable, so about 92 cents of every dollar donated goes directly to our clients and helps our clients out.
Wow.
And volunteering. We always need help volunteering, especially at our events. And in case you missed it, we got one coming up Thursday. These are the 14 restaurants that are participating. We do have a couple of posters available in the back still, I think, and I've also got more in my car. This event has literally taken over the trunk of my car. It's bad. Please help me get rid of it. Most restaurants are participating this coming Thursday, but our lovely hosts are hosting at Eddie's Italian Eatery, which is right down the road.
Next Monday night.
On Monday, May 1st, just bring a flyer, give it to your server, and part of your bill will go to help FAP.
And we'll have flyers if you forget it, so just remember to come.
Yes.
Does takeout count? Or
If you
dine in?
give the flyer, I think it should. I believe it will. I'll double check, but I believe it should. If you are really struck with the urge to go out this coming Thursday as well, we've got Avanti in Pasadena, Sevilla in Riverside, Nuno's in Upland, Back to the Grind in Riverside, Riverside Grill in Chino, BJ's in both Rancho Cucamonga and San Bernardino, the Spot Cafe in both Claremont and Upland, Buttercup Catering, which is on Arrow Route in Claremont, and Twisted Gourmet in Corona. So literally, no matter where you are or what you're doing, no excuses. House of Palm is also participating on Monday, May 1st, Tuesday, May 2nd, Wednesday, May 3rd. And the next slide, please. On Thursday, May 4th, we have Star Wars Drag Queen Bingo. It's going to be so awesome. We do have flyers. We can print out more, but honestly, it's just going to be a really great event. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're already getting reservations, which are required, by the way, either through me or to Hamburger Mary's directly. And it's been picked up by a couple of national calendars, so apparently there's an interest. Yeah.
Explain the drag queen part of the bingo.
Oh, well. So Hamburger Mary's already does just regular drag queen bingo a couple nights a week, and they partner with charities to have the proceeds from the money go there. Basically what happens is you pay $20 at the door, the people who organize the bingo take $150 off the top, everything else goes to the charity in question, in this case FAP. It's very, very good. We have a wonderful host whose name is Tommy, but at the event he goes by Bingo Betty. Usually he's dressed in a big wig and a muumuu and curlers and like big cat's eye glasses. He really gets into it. But for this one, when I realized that we were going to be doing it on May 4 and someone pointed out that at Star Wars Day, I emailed him and I asked him what he thought about making it themed. And he said, I think I have Princess Leia drag. So that was really what cinched it. That's how we came to do Star Wars Bingo. That's when we knew that, oh yeah, that was happening. And it's a lot of fun. It's 8 games, a very quick pace, as I said earlier, some great prizes, and just a ton of fun. And Hamburger Mary's will be donating part of the food proceeds to FAP that evening as well. And this is the last slide. We have a great new website. I worked really hard on it. And there's ways to donate from there, but also volunteer, to refer people, to answer any questions. And if anyone has any questions now, I'll take them.
Any questions?
Yes.
Could you spend a little time with a question about how the situation of HIV and AIDS with the homeless population, what kind of stats are there, and what are some of the issues that are unique to the homeless population? You said a little bit on it, but I'd like to hear more.
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up because, well, this is a very general presentation. We do have another one that specifically addresses the homelessness issue. We think that the incidence of HIV among people who live in a state of homelessness is about 30%. It's tough to know for sure because that's, again, a population that's much less likely to be tested, but it could be quite conservative, but I would put it anywhere from 30 to 45%. I have seen stats as high as 45% of homeless people living with HIV. Once again, you know, sometimes for some obvious reasons, there's obviously a huge barrier to care. They're just not as likely to have insurance or to have the money to go pay a copay, or even to have the money to do things like buy condoms, or even if you have things like a needle exchange for injection drug users, someone who's homeless is not likely to know about it. There are lots of reasons why, socioeconomic reasons, barriers to care, it goes on and on. But it's a huge incidence. There's a huge intersection between homelessness and living with HIV as well. And I wish I had more for you on the stats. Once again, I'll say that probably the most important thing for reducing that is to get people into housing. A real housing first approach is very helpful, because when you can get somebody into a home and get them into a point where they can build a routine once again, people who have a regular routine and live with HIV are much more likely to take their medicine at the same time every day, which is what?
Essential.
There we go. It's just so important. It's the only way that the drugs really work is if you take it at the same time every day. Have I answered your question? Have I done a decent job of answering it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, early in the HIV and AIDS epidemic, housing was a really big issue.
And is there still discrimination, or are, in California, are there protections for people who are suffering from AIDS?
I understand now that it's actually illegal to discriminate based on status, based on HIV status. So no, that might answer part of your question.
That's part of it, but I'm guessing that there's still discrimination, or that you're...
It's entirely possible, but it could also be discrimination for other reasons. For example, you know, somebody who's been living on the street is probably less likely to take care of a motel room. They might be more likely to just disrespect the space. And so that can lead to a barrier to care for housing, because if we have somebody who walks into our office and is homeless right then, we want to get them into a motel and then find more permanent housing for them. If they then get kicked out of the hotel because of other behaviors or because they're using drugs in the hotel, that becomes an issue as well. So there's more factors to it than just out and out discrimination based on status, I'd say. Yes, Dean.
Can you explain, I'm still dumbfounded by 1 in 8 African-American females. What's causing that, and how does that happen?
Well, first of all, there's a higher incidence of Sorry, did everyone hear the question?
No.
Sorry, you guys gotta let me know these things. Dean is still quite dumbfounded at the statistic of 1 in 8 African-American women getting HIV in their lifetime, and I can certainly understand that. It's probably a combination of a few things. First of all, there's just a higher incidence of HIV among the African-American community in general. You saw that they were at the top of every other cofactor list. You know, African-American men who have sex with men, more likely to get HIV than white or Latino men who have sex with men. African-American heterosexual women, more likely to get HIV than heterosexual white or Latino women. There's just a higher incidence of HIV in the African-American community in general. And again, that gets to issues of poverty, issues of education, issues of steady job and decent careers. These are all, in almost every aspect of these things that you look at. Even if you take HIV out of it, you know, African American men are less likely to go to college than they are to go to prison. African American women are less likely to go to college than they are to have children young and not have jobs that come with full insurance in other parts of the state or other parts of the country. Again, luckily in California, we have insurance that is available to everyone, and we certainly try to get everyone on insurance as much as we possibly can, partly because, as has come out in recent discussions about healthcare, the more people that are in the system, even if they're healthy, that helps the system survive, it helps it thrive. But unfortunately, the education, wealth, and job disparities in this country disfavor African Americans more than any other group. And what is not, it's tough to collect exact statistics on this, but there's a general feeling that the African American community might be less likely to use condoms, especially combined with a higher poverty rate and less education. And that also helps contribute to the spread of HIV in that community. Yes?
Do you have any information on prison population and HIV/AIDS?
That's really tough because our group doesn't deal with the prison population until they get released. My understanding is it's quite high, especially in male prisons. I don't have any statistics off the top of my head about that, but it's certainly a huge problem, a huge issue. I can tell you that we have several clients who contracted HIV while in prison, and there are services both through parole and through other companies like ours to help people getting out of prison with HIV. It's a really great question. I'm going to look that up for next time. Thank you.
What other volunteer opportunities?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. First of all, almost every one of our offices needs office help. It's really easy. You just sign a confidentiality form, get a TB test, and then you can work in the office. And we need help in our offices. Our case managers are so busy. We're trying to grow our staff as fast as we can. In this area in general, it's very difficult to do that because there are lots of other companies that work with people with HIV. We're the only ones who, one of the only nonprofit ones, we try to stay out of each other's ways as nonprofits, but there are plenty of other medical places that work with HIV, and getting new staff members is definitely tricky. But we're trying to grow as fast as we can. until then, we need help doing filing. We need help answering phones. Our phones ring off the hook at all of our offices, especially Claremont, San Bernardino, and Riverside. Our San Bernardino office offers more services and serves more clients than any other office. And we don't have a receptionist at any office. And part of that is so that we can keep our overhead low. Again, that's how we get 92 cents out of every dollar to go to benefit our clients and not towards overhead. But we could use some help answering phones. The events are another opportunity to volunteer. I'm trying to organize our volunteers for Dining Out for Life, and right now I have to be at about 4 different restaurants at the same time. So, you know, if anyone's really desperate to volunteer, we'll take you. Really what I try to do is find opportunities as much as I possibly can for volunteers, because if you want to give back to the community, I don't want to be the one who tells you no. Yes?
The preventative care, the
Prep.
yeah. At $13,000 a year, who's the target audience for that medicine?
Well, there was a list up there. That would be men who have sex with men, African American women, certainly IV drug users, to the effect that we can get that. And again, that's part of why we really try to get everyone onto Covered California, people who are in and into insurance, because that's not something that everybody can afford out of pocket. But the state of California really cares about this issue. They've instituted a lot of help and a lot of programs and allowed a lot of federal programs and federal dollars to come into California where other states have barred it. So we will certainly do our best to get people in high-risk categories onto PrEP as fast as we can. However, it is a medication. It does have to be prescribed by a doctor. We work with AIDS Healthcare Foundation and a couple of the other HIV clinics in the area to make sure that our clients have access to medication and that they have access to a doctor. We do not offer medical services ourselves. Does that answer your question? Stereodiscordant couples, that's another really big one. That's where one member of the couple has HIV and another does not. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much, and please go to AIDS on Monday, May 1st.